this is a small audience, but you guys are really good. So, yeah, I got some money here. We'll grab it. You know, somebody said that Jewish people have 3 kinds of food: kosher, non-kosher, and Chinese. Huh? Jewish people love Chinese food. You know, every Christmas Eve, I don't know if you know this, it's sort of an unwritten law. The Jewish people, Christmas Eve, go to dinner at a Chinese restaurant, followed by a movie. This is what happens. And the Jewish-Chinese cultures come up with food, a fusion food between the two. You can see them at many restaurants. Hot and sour matzo ball soup. Huh? Pretty good. Mushu brisket. Now, you guys have heard of General Chow's chicken, right? Yeah. Well, the general, it turns out, a famous military general, has a thing for this Jewish delicacy of cow tongue. So the latest is General Chow's tongue. Now, that sounds gross, okay? You don't want to French kiss the general. Let me just tell you that right here. I mean, that's tongue in cheek, but mostly tongue. Now, for Jewish people, if you keep kosher, it's good to be in a Chinese restaurant because they don't separate milk. You can't have milk and meat, and so that's pretty good. But you know what? Growing up, I hated all things kosher, and I want to tell you why. First of all, who here is old enough to know who Jimmy Dean is? Who is he? Sausage, yeah. Jimmy Dean was like a member of my family. I love Jimmy Dean sausage. I'm not kidding. For my bar mitzvah, they wanted to have a kosher buffet. I said, no. Jimmy Dean makes a bratwurst. I want bratwurst on that table. So they had it. It effectively turned my bar mitzvah into a brat mitzvah. But that was okay. And we don't keep kosher at home, but when my grandparents, who came from Eastern Europe, come to town, we have to act like we are piously religious. My mom gets a new set of dishes. We throw out all the pork chops and the lobster. I freeze the Jimmy Dean sausage. We ain't throwing that out. And my grandpa, Hot Poppy, loved to take my brother and I to lunch at McDonald's. We love cheeseburgers at McDonald's and we order them, but you can't mix milk with meat. And my grandfather would go crazy. So he would buy the cheeseburgers. And then before he'd give them to us, he'd open the bun and he'd rip the cheese off like he was pulling a scab off a skin. Me and my brother figured out a way around this finally. We would take the denuded cheeseburgers into the bathroom at McDonald's, pull out a jar of some liquid cheese from our underwear, and repatriate our burgers. Huh? It was a Velveeta McDonald's moment, huh? Da-da-da-da-da, right? But the other reason I didn't like kosher was it made me seem Jewish, and where I grew up, you didn't want to be Jewish. My parents were transferred. My dad was transferred to a job in the Midwest, Michigan, when I was 9 years old, into a Bible Belt. We were the only Jewish people there. I promise, the only ones. Now, this was back in 1959, so it wouldn't go today. But back then, the nuns in catechism class told the students I was an offspring of the devil. And that if you just wanted to prove it, just put your hands in my hair, feel around, and you'll feel the horns. So they did it. Well, why do you think I don't have any hair anymore? They're just messing with me the whole freaking time. So my mother tried to take the edge off of this by doing a few things less Jewish and said, we're going to see Santa Claus, okay, around Christmas time. Now, I was so naive at 9 years old. I didn't know the North Pole or the South Pole. And I sort of thought Santa lived at the mall, you know? And so I went in, they sat me on his lap, and he looked at me really suspiciously and said, are you Jewish? Well, I looked at Santa back just as suspiciously and said, are you circumcised? And I didn't get the answer. He said yes, and that freaked me out. I didn't know what a 9-year-old boy should do about that. But that Christmas, I got a foreskin in my Christmas stocking. So go figure. Go figure. So, but my favorite non-kosher food is lobster. Who loves lobster in here? Huh? It's pretty good. It was my favorite food. It was. It's not anymore. Do you know why? Because I was in China a few years ago, and I was digging into a big big old 10-pound lobster, pulling a little meat out of the back of the shell. And the lobster got up and walked away. Oh my God, I freaked out. Listen, I hate sushi because it's not so much well, at least it's dead. I didn't like it as raw, but it's dead. This lobster's running away. Oh my God. I felt so sad. I tried to get it to come back. I'm sorry, I didn't, But this lobster was shy, and I think he probably didn't want to come out of the shell, so to speak. But my Chinese hosts were Chinese military people, very high up in the government, because they were welcoming me at this dinner to give a keynote address at this Chinese Cardiology Congress the next day. Dr. Maisel, we studied your preferences very good. Your food preference. They said, yeah, they did study my food. They fucking hacked my computer, is what they did. So they knew what they knew what I liked. But I said, look, I can't eat that lobster. I will not eat it. It's 10 pounds, and I know I can't eat it. They couldn't eat it either. That was a rule, So nobody was happy with me except the lobster. He got to walk away. And I was looking at these guys, the Chinese, military guys who usually tell you what to eat and you eat it, wonder if I'm going to get away. So what I did, remember I told you I hated kosher growing up? Well, suddenly I was the most kosher person in the world. Sir, big K right here, I am kosher and I cannot eat lobster. And it took them all by surprise because they didn't really know kosher. They said, oh, so sorry. But not to worry, Professor. This is not a lobster restaurant. This is famous for Beijing duck all over the world. And they were right. We walked in this restaurant. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of ducks hanging by their neck from rafters. No, really, they were hanging by a rope by their neck. You had a duck away from the ducks. It was pretty strange. Now, I didn't know really what to make of this at first. It's very famous. They hang them so the juices go into the good Beijing duck, and that's what they do. So I said, I got to find out the name and tell my family and all this. And what's the name? And they said in Chinese, which I couldn't read, but it says go for do. So I took my camera and I snapped a picture of the Chinese and I put it into Google Translate. Right? So for the dog really said it came out as go fuck a duck. Maybe it was social commentary, I don't know. But each duck had a name and a certification. Hundreds of these ducks. And you know what? I wasn't going to eat it. I didn't want to eat a duck with a name. Look, if you were going to a venison restaurant and you had to pick out a deer, and you came to one on the thing and said, Bambi, would you eat Bambi? Fuck, no. You won't eat Bambi? That's the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not eat Bambi. And you know what? I wasn't going to eat a duck named Donald or Daffy, or for that matter, Affleck. Forget it. I settled on a duck named Alfonso. I was in 4th grade with a guy named Alfonso, and he kicked the shit out of me every day at recess. I said, Alfonso, one of these days I'm going to get back at you when you least expect it. And you're going to be one dead duck. Huh? And there he is, Alfonso. So, that song, when you wish upon a duck, your dream comes true. Well, there he was. They served the duck in 4 courses on what a lazy Susan is. By the way, that was a nickname of my first wife. So first, this is unexpected, they brought out a whole plate of excised duck necks, throats with the vocal cords. The whole thing just sitting there. And I said, they expect you to eat what they bring out. And I'm thinking, oh my God, in the kitchen, there's all these ducks that they probably tied them up so they couldn't get out because they can't call for help. And nothing's coming out. Nothing is coming out. I said, I can't eat those ducks. Are not kosher. I can't eat them. Acting as if I was the world's authority on kosher duck throats, And they believed it. But that wasn't as bad as the next course. They brought out a plate of duck testicles. And the duck testicles, it there's only one testicle in each sac, and that made me worried that behind the room, there's all these ducks with only one nut, and they didn't have any vocal cords, so they couldn't scream out. So finally they said, "What do you want to eat? You're not eating anything." I was a little mad too at them. How about Cracker Jacks? Huh? Or cheese and crackers? And they said, "No, we'll bring you meat." So they brought me the feet, the web feet next, and they watched me and I'd eat the feet. The meat between it tastes like chicken, only it was like rubber chicken. And it gave me a whole new outlook on pedicures. I will never get one again, I guarantee. Now, final thing, the next day, I got to give my speech. It was before over 1,000 cardiologists. I was a keynote speaker, they had translated, it was a big deal, the press and everything was there. I wanted to make a good impression, so I decided to give the first 10 minutes in Mandarin. That's hard, it took me 2 months. And you know what? If you make one little pronunciation change, or one little change in accent, you got up with a whole different word. So I did the 10 minutes, I got a standing ovation. And at the end they came up to me and said, "Oh, great job, doctor, great job. We especially like your joke." I go, "Joke?" They said, "Yes, you say to audience, what I want to do in Beijing is 2 things. I want to go to the Great Wall, and I want to fuck a wild boar." Anyways, maybe I was a little wild, but hopefully I wasn't a bore to you guys. So thank you very much.